been in the photography community trenches for many a year now, and there's some broad statements that get thrown around as though they are gospel truth, and I think that this can overwhelm and confuse beginners and everybody else alike. So, here are my thoughts on 5 of the most prevalent photography myths that need to die. This video is sponsored by ON1, which I shall talk about in a bit. Number 1, let me show you some of my own photos for this example. Now, I really like these photos. I think the lighting is quite good. I think the composition is quite strong. I think they're quite compelling. I look back at these and go, Emily, you did an all right job. Well done. Do you know what not one of these photographs actually achieves? It doesn't tell a story. So photography myth 1, if your photograph doesn't tell a story, it's not a good photograph. And I just could not disagree with that more. I mean, I do think some of the best photographs ever taken do tell a story. And I do think those images are sometimes elevated because they pose questions. But to just broadly disregard every single image because it doesn't have a very strong story, I think is quite stupid. Honestly, between me and you, I think photographs can sometimes just look nice. And I think if you achieve that, you've achieved a good photograph. Sometimes it doesn't have to be that deep, guys. And I think sometimes this desire to make art super duper deep can sometimes be really detrimental, because I think like if you're a beginner and you're out taking photographs in your local city or your local nice woodland area, you're probably not going to come across this like once in a lifetime storytelling image. But that doesn't mean that what you capture isn't good. I've taken a few photos over my time that I think do actually pose questions and tell stories. And I don't mean war and peace, beginning, middle and end. I mean storytelling as in, does it make you ask questions about what's going on? Does it give you an emotion? Does it make it feel whimsical, sad, exciting, whatever? Those sorts of images can be very powerful, but so can just a nice blooming sunset. Number 2, have you ever been in a high pressure photography environment and you're in the wrong settings? I know I have many a time, and I will again. You find yourself fumbling for the dials, you think, oh, the shutter speed's not right, this isn't right, I'm gonna miss the moment. It happens to every photographer at one point or another. So why is the advice that if you are not shooting in full manual mode, you're not a real photographer so prevalent? Because, right, I do believe that you should be able to know your manual settings and shoot in manual mode if the situation calls for it. Like if we're doing astrophotography, for example, you're probably going to need to shoot in manual mode. There's many a reason why you do need to know your camera settings. However, 99% of the time, I think it's a great idea to let the camera take over the boring stuff. I think if you're shooting in auto ISO or auto aperture or auto shutter speed, and you have control of whichever one tickles your fancy, why is that a bad thing? If you let the camera take over some of that stuff, it leaves more headspace to concentrate on the important stuff, like composition and capturing the moment in time and making sure that you're being thoughtful around your framing. So no, thank you very much. I do not think you need to shoot full manual all the time to be a photographer. In the bin with that myth. A great example of this recently is I was in Frankfurt with the Ace Pro 2 camera, and that is, you can shoot manual settings on that, but it's a little fiddly screen and it's not great for that. So I shot all of these photos using full auto mode, just using the camera like a little point and shoot. And you know what? I got some of my favourite photos of the year in that moment, in this mall. I just think they're so interesting to look at. I love the super wide angle, I love the colours, I love the composition, and no, they do not tell a story either. Number 3 is something that I didn't realise how passionately I felt about it until very recently. I did a recent tips video where it was all about photography tips when you travel. And one of the tips was if you're in a group of people, like say you're out with family and they are not photographers, sometimes the best course of action is to carve out golden hour and then you can be present and not take photographs much for the rest of the day. And during me making this video, I started looking through my archives to find some golden hour examples. And you know what I found? Very blooming few of them. So the myth that you can only take good photos in golden hour lighting is such a lie. I mean, you can absolutely take excellent photographs at golden hour. And as an experiment, if you went to the exact same spot at different times of day, I'm pretty sure the golden hour photos would probably be your favourites. But that's not to say that you can't get photographs in all kind of lighting. And I firmly believe that all kinds of lighting is teachable. So I live in England, dull, diffused lighting. If I waited for golden hour and actually getting like bright golden lighting, I could probably take photographs about 10 times a year. So lighting can teach you things. If you have diffused, flat lighting, then your subject and your composition has to be pretty interesting. If you have harsh shadows due to sort of like just after midday, then you can use those to your advantage as well. You can get good photos in any condition, and even if it might not be the very best that you could get out of that situation, you can still learn a lot from it. If you hate paying monthly for Adobe products, then check out the sponsor of today's video, ON1. This is ON1 Photo Raw 2026, and it's an all-in-one photo editor that you just pay once for and then you own. Yay! Let me show you some of my favourite features. The mask features are really impressive. They're really advanced and clean. All I need to do is press subject and the dog is completely masked. With darker fur, it's always a good idea to raise the shadows a bit just to bring out a bit of detail, but you don't want to do that to the whole image. With masking, this is really simple and effective. Here's the before and after. You can add in LUTs as presets as well. Here are my own City Escape presets, and I love that it gives you a full preview while you choose. Then you can roll down the opacity to taste. Again here, I used the masking feature to emphasize my subject, which is the tiny bird. I did a video about Lightroom alternatives earlier in the year, and I crowned ON1 as the #1 winner, and for good reason. There's tons of effects to choose from. I'm only scratching the surface here, and one of my favorites is glow. Watch the neon sign in this image. It makes it look like there's a mist filter on the camera. If you'd like to learn more, then check out the link in the description, and a huge thanks to ON1 for supporting the channel. And number 4. Possibly the most important one on this list, and I have a great story about this that my little camera nerd brain just really resonated with. Any editing to a photo isn't a real photo. And I'm sure you've heard many a variation, get it right in camera or it doesn't count, cropping is cheating, Photoshop is cheating, editing at all is cheating, etc. So I was at the Leica factory recently, and yes, I will be making it my entire personality for a little while. It was such a fun trip. And they were celebrating 100 years of photography. And in the museum bit, they had on the wall like the 36 most influential photos that have ever been taken with a Leica camera. One of them that we heard about was this one. You've probably seen it, it's a very famous photo. But did you know that it is heavily edited, and this came out in 1945. First of all, it's a reenactment, so the sky was clear, and the photographer did a double exposure in the sky to make it look like it was cloudy still. And secondly, quite interestingly, the subject in the scene with the flag, he had lots of different watches on his wrist, which was an indication of theft and looting, and it was obviously a war crime. So the photographer in the darkroom blurred that part of the photo and made it sort of disappear in the image so that the person in the photo wouldn't get into any trouble. And I just thought, wow, this is one of the most influential photos ever taken, and even then, 80 years ago, it was heavily edited. So I firmly believe editing is a choice and a spectrum, and you can be a purist and just be like in camera or nothing, or you can go entirely in the opposite direction. Now, recently I did a video on AI in photography, and one of the comments really resonated with me that I thought was quite cool. If you're using AI to remove something, like if you remove a pigeon from a street photography scene, or if you're cleaning up noise in an image, then that I think is a really powerful use of AI and wonderful. I think if you're adding things in with AI, like fake subjects, or even worse, typing a description into a box and it giving you a photo, then I would argue that that would be too much editing and perhaps not photography at all. But again, that's just my opinion. Everyone can be on the spectrum somewhere, and that's sort of where I'm like, no, not for me. But I thought it was fascinating to know that from the very beginnings of photography, editing was a thing. And I love that. I think that's so cool. And I'm going to keep that in my back pocket if anyone throws that nugget at me in future. And number 5, a topic that's very close to my heart, actually. Let me show you some photos. These are some of my favourite photos that I've taken over the last few years, and you may notice something, well, maybe a few things, but the thing I want you to notice is they're not really in any particular genre or niche, are they? There's street photography, there's portraits, there's wildlife photography, there's whatever is in there, long exposures, I don't know. There's all kinds of experimental stuff that I've tried over the years. And the myth that I would like to bust into oblivion is that in order to succeed in photography, you need to pick one particular niche. Now, if you are doing this as a job, then having a portfolio that shows what you do, like if you're a wedding photographer, you don't want to start putting photographs of ducks at your local lake into your Instagram feed. But in terms of progressing as a photographer, I so firmly believe that nothing will progress you further than trying something new. Because when you are a little butterfly of photography, a little tinkerer like I am, I've never found one thing that I'm like, I could do this for the rest of my life, because it's just so much cool stuff to do. What you very quickly start to realise is each genre will teach you something. Like photographing large animals on safari and then small animals like puffins enables me to know inside out the best burst modes for other scenarios, like even something as mundane as a confetti shot. So whatever niche of photography that you want to have a dabble in, it can always give you transferable skills, and nothing will teach you the ins and outs of your camera faster than trying a style of photography that's not what you usually do, because you have to be really on the ball with it and think about things in a way where otherwise you might have like muscle memory. Like if I'm walking around a city, I know my camera settings, I know what I can do without even thinking about it. But if I'm thrust into like a portraiture environment, or I'm taking portraits of people in tanks underwater and I only have a couple of seconds because they, can't breathe underwater, suddenly I'm thinking, oh my God, if I get this setting wrong, or if it's not in focus, or if it focuses on the glass instead of the person, or the shutter speed's wrong, then, they're drowning for no good reason. So nothing gets you to grips with your camera more than trying different styles of photography. And I would so urge you to do that. Even as someone who is admittedly a camera and lens hoarder, if you had a set budget for your hobby for the year, going on a workshop or doing a different photography experience would probably enrich you a lot more than getting a new lens or a new camera body. In an ideal world, we do both. But, knowledge over camera hoarding most of the time. Check out this video next, where I go through some travel and photography tips to help you get the best out of your next holiday.